begin by commending the member for Caerphilly for his work in bringing this bill before the House today, and to campaigners in what they are doing to prevent the misuse of litigation to suppress freedom of speech. Democratic and press freedom are fundamental to our rights, and in challenging corruption and the abuse of power, when whistleblowers speak out and when journalists and a free press report the truth, society is better for it. Just this week, Julian Assange's extradition appeal closed at the Royal Courts of Justice, and it's very concerning to hear that Julian Assange is unwell and unable to appear in court. I'm very conscious of the fact that there are ongoing proceedings, but I think what I am going to say is that human rights are central to what is happening here, not just in how he's been treated, just for the simple act of telling the truth, but if extradited, Assange could be at risk of treatment amounting to torture and other forms of ill treatment or punishment, including the death penalty. Fundamentally, Julian Assange's case has profound consequences for press freedom and democracy around the world. Because, Mr. Speaker, we cannot say that we stand for press freedom if freedom only exists if it does not challenge or go beyond what certain powers want. And as my honourable friend has said, one such way of undermining our freedoms is where the rich and powerful use the threat of costly legal action as a means of suppressing public criticism. That is why last year many of us welcomed amendments to the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act to allow for UK judges to be given new powers to dismiss lawsuits attempting to silence those speaking out about economic crime. But as has been said, however, the limited scope of the bill, as well as certain shortcomings in the text itself, those amendments fell short of providing meaningful protection against SLAPPs. There is currently an inequality in the current legislation as it stands for those subjected to SLAPPs that do not relate to economic crime and corruption. We know that powerful men use their power and the law to silence women, often described as gagging orders. The purpose of these proceedings is to silence, intimidate, discredit, and further disempower survivors. Some campaigners call it gendered censorship. It's a phenomenon in the UK, but it's also a global phenomenon. Therefore, whilst I welcome the ambition of the bill before the House today, I still believe there may be scope for further amendments concerning the definition of what a SLAPP is, so that domestic abuse is fully included in its scope, particularly in its understanding of public interest. I say this because we all know of a series of libel cases where wealthy men have sought to protect their reputations from women who accuse them of abuse. The legislation as it currently stands puts these survivors at a disadvantage. For example, under the Defamation Act 2013, the defendant in libel cases can argue a public interest defence, but this is not available to survivors. And I would appeal today to the government to look into this carefully and look into how provisions in the proposed bill can be not just extended in terms of the civil courts, but also in the family courts as well. In January 2022, I participated in a backbench business debate on the use of lawfare and strategic litigation against public participation by those seeking to suppress public debate, bully people into submission, and conceal vital information that is in the public interest. I described my own experiences of lawfare being used against myself, and the House will be aware that I was completely cleared and vindicated in Snaresbrook Crown Court after what I and many others in my constituency and around the UK viewed to have been vexatious litigation pursued with the purpose of shutting down my public participation as a democratically elected Socialist Member of Parliament and as a survivor of domestic abuse. The use of lawfare by abusers to pursue their current or ex-partner is coming more and more to light. And I'm aware that the occurrence of civil litigation cases of this nature has drastically increased, particularly following the widely publicised Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp case in the US. And the most common proceedings we see are brought by men accused of sexual misconduct and/or domestic violence, launching vexatious cases in relation to defamation, libel, misuse of private information, harassment, and press injunctions. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, Irene Khan, writing in a dedicated report on the issue of gendered censorship in 2021, said, and I quote, "In a perverse twist in the hashtag #MeToo age, women who publicly denounce alleged perpetrators of sexual violence online are increasingly subject to defamation suits or charged with criminal libel or the false reporting of crimes. Weaponising the justice system to silence women feeds impunity whilst also undermining free speech. And I would add to this, barristers Jennifer Robinson and Dr. Yoshida have argued that they make the argument really in their book that the current situation strikes an unfair balance between his right to reputation and her right to freedom of speech. And what's missing in the current legislation in the UK as it stands is a recognition of the importance of her additional rights, her right to live a life free from gender-based violence and her right to equality. Mr. Speaker, the practice of abusers weaponising civil litigation against survivors as we know it is a continuation of abuse as well as an additional trauma. I find myself often asking the question, if we cannot speak about violence against women and girls, then how can we even tackle it? By their nature, these cases misuse the courts and are brought against survivors to silence them and re-victimise them, both emotionally and financially. And I appeal and urge again for the government to really look at the situation in the family courts as well as the civil courts as well. I believe no one should suffer domestic abuse, and anyone in such a situation should be supported in speaking out. This is a matter of public good and it is a matter of public interest. Thank you.